This is a view of the old wall cemetery of St. Boniface at Maryhill, Ontario, which was called New Germany up till about 1948 or so. The name wasn't changed because of the war, but because there's a town not too far away which is larger, also called New Germany. So the people were given the choice of a new name, and of course they decided on Maryhill from the list that the government gave them. Here you can see the old wall cemetery now after 8 years of restoration, and in a minute we'll go inside. As you can see, this wall is quite substantial, about 7 feet high in places, 6 all the way around. It was built in about 1852. The land was given by the Zettel family, who were new settlers from Alsace and the little town of Soufflenheim, which is where my family come from too. So many of my family are related to others in the area, probably about 800. And as a result, most of these people in here are relatives. And here we are at the gate. We'll go inside. So now you can see a ground level view. There are about 200 unmarked graves. Originally this cemetery was across the street right from here, and they decided to move it over here when they built the new church in about 1855. The Jesuits come out and did the moving in, and of course a lot of the tombstones had wooden crosses, and so were literally unmarked. These ones date back to 1850. I think the earliest burial is actually 1854. Now many of these crosses are quite unique, especially these iron crosses that you see here. We have about 90 to 95 altogether, as well as these other tabular monuments. And as you can see, just about everyone has been restored over the last 5 years. Here's one I did where I replaced the cross from a copy, as you can see, and it had broken off at the bottom. So I made a mold up to replace the bottom section and then recast it, and here it is back exactly the way it was in 1889. Gee. We have a number of very special and unique monuments here in the St. Boniface Old Wall Cemetery. One example here is this very ornate stone. Some people say marble, but it's actually a very soft stone, more like a limestone, I think, that goes right back to, again, the early part of the 18th century or 19th century. And again, this is a design that was brought more or less from that area of the Bas Rhine. And right next to it is an even more unique monument, which is of course the famous Alsatian double angel type monument. This one is in the form of an iron cross, and as you can see, I've restored it about a year or so ago. And traditionally those angels would have been painted lifelike colors and the leaves, etc. But for the moment at least, it's just black. Perhaps I'll go on and do it as after I get a little more experience in Alsace of the colors they used. But for now it's all restored and hopefully good for another 100 years. As you can see, we have many designs of iron crosses. I'll give you a few examples right now. These crosses were actually made by the local blacksmiths, and it provided a new income, of course, with the start of the Iron Age. The blacksmiths were busy, but in the winter months they seemed to have found time to create such traditional monuments. And actually, this is sort of where the Iron Cross idea began here in Canada, not Alsace. In fact, you see very few iron crosses in Alsace. You'll notice we have two colors, more or less, of crosses, the black and what we call a French blue. I'm not exactly sure why they were originally painted blue and black. Black, of course, you would think would be the tradition, but here we have about 90, or rather 45 crosses that were painted blue. Perhaps it was just the blacksmith's choice, but I'm not sure of that, so stay tuned. Now here we have a double iron cross. I think we have about 5 doubles in the cemetery, and again very rare, where a couple both decided on this design. And as you can see, it has new headstones mounted. Originally these stones were wonderful because you could pick your cross out and then just stick your own stone on the top. Unfortunately, a lot of the stones fell off over the years. Luckily, they weren't all lost, and I'll show you in a minute one of the ways I've found to preserve these. Here we have 3 crosses. The 2 on the left, the stones have been able to stay in place over the last 100 years. Unfortunately, this one here, as you can see, has fallen and broken. So what I've done is made a little aluminum frames for them, and just put the remains of the stone, or in some cases like this one here, the entire stone can be held in place where it should be, up safe off the ground, and hopefully will allow for future historians and people who are interested in their heritage to find the resting place of their family. Here's a gaggle of iron crosses. As you can see, we're in the section of the cemetery now which is more or less the last section of the original settlers that came here, and as you can see, they really did favor the iron cross. Here's another beautiful double which I restored about 5 years ago now. Most of the scroll work had fallen away. You can see I'm missing a little bit on the right hand side, but I do have a new piece to go in there this summer, so hopefully that'll complete this one. Actually, these crosses were more expensive than the stone ones, from what I understand. Most of them were made by a blacksmith in Bridgeport, which is about 5 miles from Maryhill. Here's one I've completed the restoration on. Many of the scrolls had vanished over the years, both from age and maybe more so from the lawnmower. Regardless, it's still here, and as you can see, right back in tip-top shape as you would have seen it 150 years ago. This is the sort of thing that happens from the lawnmower over the years. They get caught, and of course, who can blame them? And of course, being near the wall, this whole place is moving downhill, so to speak. So lots of straightening to do every spring. This monument is the only one I know of with the two Alsatian angels in stone. When I go back to Europe, I often see the two angels, but more in Austria and especially in Salzburg. There you'll find literally hundreds of iron crosses. In fact, I think there's maybe 5 iron crosses for every monument. Anyway, this one was put in here in about the 1880s by one of the original settlers. And as you can see, the left angel had vanished years and years ago. So just to reenact, let's put it, the monument, I made a little one out of cement. Actually, that's the third one I made. The other two were far more detailed, made out of artist's clay. Unfortunately, they did not survive our Canadian winters, which drop right down to the 20, 30, and occasionally 40 below. So it's amazing any of these stones have stayed. As you can see, the restoration project doesn't go too far. We want it to look old as it did, or let's put it, we don't want it to look new. We want it to look as you would find it without being changed too much. And for future historians, as you can see, the name is worn off, but I've put on the name of the deceased, which is Lucas Zettel, and it was actually the Zettels that helped or gave money towards the cemetery. He was 1785 to 1859. The amazing thing is right next door is his wife, who decided on a iron cross design, and she died in 1874. This section of the cemetery is more of the sons of the settlers. Again, many of my family are in here. At the back is Barney Schmuck, as you can see, with the tall cross. A lot of these crosses had simply fallen off. Many were just piled at the back wall. Actually, they were going to remove about a third of the different monuments, and all of the iron crosses they had decided were to be removed. I mean, the cemetery board at St. Boniface, until I understood one of my relatives was to be moving, and of course I stopped that. I then began restoring the entire graveyard, which has taken now close to 8 years all by myself. It's a work of love and a lot of fun too. You never know who you're going to meet in here. Here's another iron cross that's extremely decorated by a blacksmith. As you can see, there's a second one behind that's of equal fanciness and design. When I say these were as expensive as the stone ones, one like this would exceed it. In other words, it would probably cost like $35 in 1850 to 1890-ish. But you got to remember, that's like well, $1,400 or more, I guess, in today's money. So they weren't cheap. And most of these people, of course, just worked on their farms. This is the child section over here. As you can see, we don't have too many monuments left. They were small and of course broke. All of these have been restored by myself over the years. And my dad used to come out and work away back in the 1990s. The type of restoration, as you can see, is as simple as this one here, which had broke at that line. And we have now epoxies that let us reglue the stone without almost making an invisible repair, so it still looks historic. Now you can see this stone had been buried up to a half of its height when I started this restoration. Again, my idea is to make it look original, like I haven't been here, and I think we did a good job. This is a monument of my great uncle, I guess, Heinrich Schmuck, who died in 1875, and this is the stone that started me on the restoration of the entire cemetery. As I said, over the years, my grandfather actually used to come out because he was the youngest of 13 children. And then my dad took on the tradition because he was the youngest of 3. And I, of course, being the oldest son, I came out with him and helped him until he died in 1990. So the Schmucks have been busy at this cemetery for a long time, but once we realized what was to happen, I really went to town, I guess. So here you can see how I made a new foundation actually to hold it up and not have any problems, but again to try to keep it looking original. An interesting part of this stone, it said died because of his religion or innocent martyr. This is another type of monument that I find, and again, Joseph Holter, very famous family in the area, but again a child who had lived from 1878 to 1885. And you can see the monument is actually cast like cement, and with the name just on metal that has the name stamped on. There's about 8 or 10 of this style here. Again, it had fallen into a lot of repair. The foundation had broken away and it was ready to fall over. So one day, and there it is, just like it was back in the beginning. As you can see, like Picasso, I write on everything. This is a view from the child section heading more towards the gate of the cemetery. Again, as you can see, the cemetery is actually full, though a lot of the stones either never had a marker, or were wooden and over the last 150 years have fallen away. As you can see, a lot of iron crosses from this angle. Again, the blue is a color that doesn't seem to mean if their preference was more towards saying something, like the French blue is the color's name, but I don't think any of these people were making political statements. It's just that they preferred blue myself. As you can see, a lot of the monuments were well thought out, had a lot of class, you know, they really did put a lot of effort into what they wanted on their graves for the next eternity. Here's another interesting one with the look of the pioneer logs. Again, most of these crosses had fallen off and simply needed to be put back in. Now there's a pin underneath the cross, and they were just cast iron, of course, and over the years they rusted and fell or broke off, and now I've replaced all these with stainless steel, so hopefully they'll last a lot longer. This area of the cemetery is right in the center pretty much. One item that's kind of neat is that the cemetery board created this monument, which has all of the names of people who are buried here, whose monuments either have been lost over time or were made of wood and just rotted away. But anyway, they've taken the time and effort and expense to list everyone on this monument, which is really great. So if you're doing family research, you can come here, see where they were, and hopefully help solve some of your questions. So this is the last project I've been working on, which is the Crucifixion Scene. And if you look on my website, you'll see pictures of the before. Again, the idea was to do no harm, to restore it as it would have been more realistically. When I started it, you'll see that it was all painted at one time, probably in the 1950s, and the paint had worn off and leaving some parts exposed. But anyway, it was a real mess, so I've decided to put everything back as I found it, as I stripped it off. The bottom is a medium gray, which was original. Now, the corpus was painted, but originally it was, like as you see it, stripped clean of any paint, but the crown of thorns had a color of green on it. The wounds, of course, were painted with the red for the blood. The hands, of course, with the nails, and the nails are bronze, which is the Roman metal for judgment. Again, the cross, the name up at the top, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, would have been cloth or a skin. And when I was in Israel, I noticed a lot of them were of the skin color. So I thought, well, I guess we better stick with that, seeing as this is the place the crucifixion actually happened. Now the cross, I'm going to leave it as it is. This is the original black color that it had been painted with, but it really looks good to me. The old iron cross, or old rugged cross is what I'm trying to say, I guess, really fits this. You'll see a lot of the corpses in Europe and even in Israel all painted in flesh tones, and actually quite gory. Where he'd fallen, the knees would be bloody. Any place that's mentioned in the Stations of the Cross are easily visible on the corpus. Many of them, though, still have the eyes open slightly, and as you can see, I've left them closed, but you'll also notice a repair made to the nose, and I'm pleased to say that I used my nose to make the model. So if you think you recognize them, then I'll leave that alone. RS everywhere. Well, that brings our little tour of the Old Wall Cemetery here at Maryhill, Ontario, Canada to an end. If anyone has any questions about the history or the methods of restoration of the different monuments that you've seen in this little video, don't hesitate to give me a call or an email at any time. We have a lot of great literature available on the proper way to restore and clean monuments, so don't hesitate if you're interested. I'm sure I'll be glad to help out in any way I can. Thank you very much. Ron Schmuck signing out from the Old Wall Cemetery of Maryhill, Ontario. Thank you.